See, I told you it was going to be relevant. You may think that this is a very niche video on a very niche topic, even by history standards, and that this video really doesn't need to exist. Counterpoint, I really like saying Pendergast, so we're gonna fucking do Tom Pendergast. Niche and complex political figures are fun to talk about anyway. Don't forget to leave your seatbelt on with the seat in the upright position, keep your hands to yourself, try not to die, and thank you for choosing Spartan history. Thomas Joseph Pendergast was born on July 22nd, 1872 in St. Joseph, Missouri. He was the 9th child of an Irish immigrant family, which I think tells you all you need to know, really. His early years are a little cloudy, as one might expect from a relatively unknown Irishman from Missouri. What is known is that he definitely finished 6th grade. Everything after that is basically unknown. He said he went to college, but fun fact, no. He did have a couple of odd jobs here and there, before deciding to pack his things and head to the big city. Kansas City, Missouri. Kansas City, Missouri. He moved there in 1894 and went to work with his brother James at a hotel/bar that he owned. You see, brother James was a rather well-off man. He was a fairly successful businessman established in the West Bottoms, read the hood, of the city. It was your quintessential turn-of-the-century Midwestern city district, a totally underfunded and under-maintained industrial shithole in the corner of the city, packed to the brim with disenfranchised immigrants and assorted lower-class workers. Terrible place to raise a family, but a great place to own a fucking bar. And so, brother James made good money and was very popular. Popular enough to get him elected as alderman to the ward representing the area. He was overall a good guy, and actually tried to represent the people of his constituency, being a driving force behind the Bottoms, getting a few nice things, and keeping what little shit they did have. Also, coincidentally, ignoring the rather large gambling and alcohol businesses that made him a shitload of money. Now, our friend Tom was watching this very closely. As it turns out, having a brother in politics will teach you a thing or two about how to succeed. It will also get you literally any job that you could possibly fucking want. Over the next decade, Tom's influence slowly grew, and by 1900, with James getting quite old and frail, Tom began assuming more and more of his duties to help him out. James would pass in 1911, and a perfectly groomed Tom Pendergast was basically handed the election for his brother's seat on a silver platter. In 1911 is also when he would get married, eventually having 3 kids. Now would be the part where I explain what machine politics is, but guess what, motherfucker, I thought ahead, that's already been done. So instead I will jump straight to the part where the Pendergast machine takes its shape. Tom naturally, immediately, moved to consolidate rule over at least his part of Kansas City, using much of the same tactics as his brother. He played to the large lower-class population, organizing things like large Thanksgiving and Christmas dinners, and using his power to help deliver essentials to the needy of his ward. This, in turn, almost guaranteed his re-election. Tom wasn't completely uncontested, though. The local Democrat Party machine was fucking dense, and the actual political boss of Kansas City wasn't going down without a fight. Tom was down for a brawl, though, so while outwardly agreeing to a compromise and power-sharing deal, he planned to outmaneuver him behind the scenes. To do this, he would step down from city council near the end of 1915 and slither his way into the Democratic Party itself. During this time, his nephew, Jim Pendergast, had become friends with a relatively unknown figure during his tour of World War I. I'm sure this won't matter, though. In 1922, Jim casually suggested that he run for an administrative position in Jackson County, a position that, with the help of Pendergast, he won quite handily. I wonder where this story goes. Tom, meanwhile, was busy fucking around and consolidating the Democratic Party, using all manner of bribes, threats, and voter intimidation. In 1925, he was finally able to oust his primary political rival, and essentially gain total control over Kansas City. He did not directly run things, instead preferring to run the people who actually ran things. The period of the Pendergast machine was a very interesting time for the city. His extravagant displays towards the underprivileged gave him considerable popular support. He, of course, also made heavy use of fraud, intimidation, bribery, and other corrupt shit to ensure that his goons never lost elections. And oftentimes voter turnout would be close to 100%, which is fucking unheard of in Western democracies. Oftentimes, his goons would simply wave guns around and occasionally get into fucking shootouts with rival factions. Not only that, but he made a lot of money from alcohol and gambling, so during Prohibition, he would bribe cops to look the other way while all of these vices went unchecked. He himself had a very bad gambling addiction, only fueling his laissez-faire policy further. He would openly ally with organized crime to get his way, turning a blind eye to their activities, presumably in exchange for a cut in political protection. Because of this, Kansas City had basically zero regulation for his time in power, essentially being Vegas before Vegas was a thing. He would stack elections in the favor of the people who he liked to make sure that the loyalists were always in power, awarded fat government contracts to his own companies, and there are even urban legends that revolve around him having some opponents of his straight up killed. However, despite his questionable methods, many would consider this a sort of golden age for Kansas City. For one, the jazz scene in the city exploded, and to this day, Kansas City is known as one of the main jazz cities. The very lax policies on the nightlife gave many artists and musicians a chance to make a name for themselves in a city with basically no regulation for that sort of thing. Pendergast also went on a building spree, with numerous important landmarks built during the era in a unique Art Deco style, along with many useful municipal buildings and schools that still stand to this day. In a way, he is pretty much the man who built Kansas City during his reign. When the Great Depression struck, Pendergast made a genuine effort to relieve the suffering of the population, using his businesses to help supply large public works projects and reducing the reliance on efficient machines, instead allowing for more people to find work in manpower-intensive positions. He would personally pay for people's medical bills and was a driving force behind many in the lower strata having jobs at all. The people, of course, returned the favor by re-electing everyone Pendergast told them to. He would even go as far as to reinforce his middle-class support by organizing social events like baseball and bowling leagues, dances, large dinners, holiday events, and all kinds of parties and gatherings. Now, none of this was likely out of the goodness of his heart, obviously, but this brings about the Huey Long argument. Is a person using bad methods to achieve good things make them a bad person? Anyways, by the 1930s, Pendergast's influence had extended to the state and national level. At this point, he commanded the voters with such efficiency that he pretty much controlled who the next governor of the state of Missouri was going to be, and was even capable of mobilizing to sway federal elections, most notably in favor of Franklin Delano Roosevelt. His most notable political victory, however, was that guy I mentioned earlier, because in 1934, Pendergast threw in for this guy as Democratic candidate for U.S. Senate. This guy would go on to fucking win, earning the nickname the Senator from Pendergast as a derogatory statement about who he had in his corner. Now that is power. Stick around to the end to learn how this ended for our little senator friend. Of course, though, all wild rides must come to an end eventually. Pendergast's began, of course, with a near-perfect storm of tomfuckery that would never happen again in a million years. Pendergast supported one Lloyd C. Stark for governor of Missouri in 1936. He handily won, obviously, but the Pendergast goons were apparently extra thuggish this time around. By all accounts, Stark wanted that Senate seat, but Pendergast was still in the guy's corner, so he had a dilemma. Remember though, Pendergast was in bed with the mob, and the US government was busy cracking down on them, along with corruption in general. It was pretty much over right there. The mob was involved in voter fraud and election rigging. Pendergast was involved with these same mobsters. Stark took his chance, and when the feds came knocking, he was more than happy to assist in the takedown. The voter fraud trials that followed indicted 278 people, and over 200 went to jail. Pendergast himself did not. However, the reveal of the extent of his corruption pissed the Democrats off, with Roosevelt himself withdrawing his favor from the man and most national funding being revoked. Furthermore, the people of rural Missouri had turned on him as well, since they were not nearly as supportive of him as the city folks were. That wasn't enough, though. In 1939, Stark would tip off the authorities that he had committed tax evasion. Remember, kids, don't fuck with the IRS. 15 months of federal prison later, he emerged to find that some enterprising individuals had cracked down on corruption and destroyed the Pendergast machine in the process. Old and sick with colon cancer, Pendergast chose to retire, living under the radar. He would have a heart attack and died on January 26, 1945 at the age of 72. His funeral would be attended by Vice President Harry Truman, who apparently referred to the king of Kansas City as a friend. 3 months later, the senator from Pendergast was sworn in as 33rd President of the United States following the death of FDR. In my opinion, that is possibly the greatest legacy you could possibly fucking leave. Naturally, this means that Tom Pendergast is directly responsible for the atomic bombings of Japan and therefore the popularization of anime. He was a man who really defies characterization, and he could very easily be seen as a man with good intentions or the mother of all assholes. Machine politics in Missouri largely died with him, but the cute building at 1908 Main Street where his headquarters resided has been declared a historical site by the city of Kansas City. Of course though, if you want to see the legacy of Tom Pendergast, all you really need to do is head downtown and look up. That about does it for this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you around.